All right, welcome. Today we're diving into something really fascinating, the teachings of Amenomioyagami. This is a spiritual philosophy that's going to make you rethink, well, pretty much everything you know about economics, wealth, and what it really means to be a leader.
So let's just jump right in with a huge question, one that really gets at the heart of our assumptions about money. Can you actually take this world's wealth with you to the next life? Well, according to this philosophy, the answer is probably not what you're thinking.
So first up, let's talk about economics beyond this world, a place where the cash in your wallet has absolutely no value.
The core idea here is that our material economy, the one we live and breathe every day, is just one piece of a much, much bigger puzzle. The source material tells us that in the spiritual realm, which it calls the real world, our rules of economics just don't apply. Money as we know it, it's completely useless there.
So what do they use instead? Well, this philosophy introduces something called the economics of gratitude. In this system, real value, true wealth, isn't something you can store in a bank. It's measured by the gratitude you receive from others through your selfless actions.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Look at this direct comparison. Our earthly economy is often driven by self-interest and profit, right? But in the spiritual economy, that whole idea is flipped on its head. The focus is entirely on altruism, on helping others. And success? It's measured by the richness of your heart. And this has some massive implications. According to the source, how you act economically, right here, directly decides where you end up in the afterlife. It's not about how much money you made. The real questions are, what was your motivation? What was the process like? And crucially, how did you give that wealth back to the world?
That brings us right to our next section, the source of true wealth. We're going to look at how you can unlock real value through three key principles: truth, goodness, and beauty.
So, if our actions on Earth matter that much, how do you actually create the right kind of wealth? The teaching is very clear on this. It says legitimate wealth can't just be useful, it has to be infused with these three core pillars.
The first pillar is truth. Pretty straightforward, right? This just means that any wealth you generate has to be completely free of deception. It has to be built on a foundation of pure honesty and sincerity.
The second pillar is goodness. This is all about making a positive impact. The work you do and the wealth that comes from it has to serve a purpose beyond just making money. It has to protect people, serve them, and genuinely improve their lives.
And finally, the third component is beauty. And we're not just talking about things looking pretty. This is about functional beauty, elegant service, and a kind of deep craftsmanship and thoughtful design that elevates something from being merely useful to being truly exceptional. Okay, so let's zoom out a bit. We've talked about the individual. Now let's look at the big picture. In Section 3, a society guided by the middle way. The social philosophy that guides all of this is called the middle way. The core idea is actually pretty simple. A good, healthy society is one that fairly rewards people who work hard and diligently. It's this balance that keeps everyone motivated to chip in and do their part. And this principle is fueled by something the source calls the law of Enji, which is basically a virtuous cycle. It all starts with individual motivation and effort. That effort leads to creative work and new ideas. That work then gets its just reward, which brings prosperity. And here's the kicker: that prosperity inspires even more creation and effort. It's like a self-sustaining engine for societal progress. Now, this leads to a pretty provocative point from the source material. It cautions against what it specifically calls a godless democracy. The argument here is that if a system focuses only on redistributing wealth to create inequality of outcome instead of inequality of opportunity, it risks breaking that virtuous cycle. Why? Because it kills the spirit of diligence. It removes the incentive to strive.
And that brings us perfectly to the final piece of the puzzle. Section 4. The mission of virtuous leaders.
So, what's the engine that actually drives this ideal society forward? Well, according to these teachings, it's virtue. But this isn't some passive moral high ground. It's defined as an active wisdom, something that's forged through tough self-discipline and real training.
So, leaders who have this virtue, they have a dual mission. Their job isn't just to manage the economy and bring prosperity to the nation. No, they also have this really heavy responsibility to morally and ethically guide the people in the right direction.
And the source even provides a practical framework for this. It says leaders are meant to develop this virtue by actively practicing what are called the four righteous paths. Things like love, wisdom, self-reflection, and progress.
Which leaves us all with one final question to think about. If gratitude were the only real currency, how rich would you be? How would you even measure your own wealth? Something to ponder. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.